What's up, everybody? Before we get into this episode, we have to give a big shout out to all of our sponsors. Without them, this wouldn't be possible. If you're looking to train your athletes in person or remote, you need to make sure that you're utilizing TeamBuildr. I have had TeamBuildr since 2019 and still utilize it with my remote athletes. This makes everything simple, from the ability to program, have videos right there, wellness questionnaires. Loved being able to have it in person at the rack at Towson, and being able to have it in person now at Goldfinch. This has made my life easier as a coach. If you're still printing on paper, I don't know what you're doing. If you have a different software company, again, I don't know what you're doing. Check out TeamBuildr down in the link below. Hawkin Dynamic is the best option if you're trying to get any force plate data or if you're trying to collect any isometric mid-thigh pulls. Not only can you do isometric mid-thigh pulls for the lower body, but I call it an isometric mid-thigh pull for your upper body, where you're able to do an isometric push-up into something where your back is pushing into a bar and your hands are on the force plate. I utilized Hawkin's force plates and Hawkin's software when I was at Towson. Still utilize it now when I'm at Goldfinch. If you're using the other competitors, I don't know what you're doing. Hawkin's customer service is second to none. Hawkin's software and their hardware, again, second to none. Check them out in the link down below. Are you expanding and need more equipment inside your current room? Or are you building a new weight room and you need to get some equipment? You need to look no further than Powerlift. I had Powerlift equipment when I was at Harvard, Iowa, and at the University of Maryland. I'm currently utilizing their stuff right now. I'm telling you, Powerlift strong, Powerlift made here in America, here in the great state of Iowa, made, manufactured. You have the ability for customization, whether it's on the bench, whether it's on the upholstery, whether it's on the bumpers, across the rack. There are countless options, making sure it's designed to your specific brand. It's Powerlift made, it's Powerlift strong, it's not cheap like all the other competitors, and the people inside of Powerlift are people that you want to be with. Check them out in the link down below. Are you or your athletes waking up too hot or too cold in the middle of the night? Or are you looking for a sleep tracker option that doesn't involve wearing a ring or a wrist or a watch, something on your body? Then you need to look no further than the company SleepMe. SleepMe makes chili pads, which keep your bed cold or warm depending on what you want. And they also have a tracker that will go underneath that pad, so it will be able to tell how well you slept. When I did a little study on myself with the Aura Ring and with the SleepMe tracker, they were within 97% of each other, and it was actually pretty astonishing how similar the two were. I love my chili pad. It makes me sleep great. I sleep cold. I actually wake up cold now. I haven't woke up warm. And pretty much ever since I've had it, I don't like sleeping on the road because I don't have the ability to use my chili pad. Bunch of former colleagues back at Towson got it. My stepmother got it. Check it out in the link down below. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Cheeky Midweeky, where we are making strength and conditioning not boring anymore. And today we are joined by Andrew Althoff, who is working for the NFL Carolina Panthers. Andrew, thanks for joining us today, brother.
Appreciate you having me.
So right now, anybody that's listening, it is draft week, all right? Wednesday, middle of draft week. For us strength coaches that have not worked in the pros, what does draft week mean like for you and everything that has been going up to it?
Really, draft week is kind of, I think, a chance for every organization to just kind of see what the next, the next group of talent coming out of the college side looks like. And teams are trying to figure out how that meshes with kind of what they currently have, and just really kind of go from there and add and subtract based off of what they feel is best, best for their individual roster. And it's kind of an exciting time for all the young kids to get a chance to kind of see what they can do. And I get right this year, I'm just watching from afar. So I'm back here in Charlotte and just kind of helping keep things going on our side. And like I said, it's definitely kind of an exciting time. It's kind of the first kind of ramp up for the next year.
So like this is more of a start to the next year versus like an ending, like, because just in terms of like, is it any of our strength coaches that work in college, and you've worked in college, it's like, hey, the bowl game, is it the end of last year? Is it the beginning of this year? Because like when I was at Iowa, Coach Ferentz was always like, oh, it's a great start to next year and see what we have, versus some people were like, you got to finish the year right and send the seniors off. Like how do you balance that duality?
I think for me, like always on the college side, too, like I was at Baylor for quite a while, and it's like I always looked at the bowl game as like the first game for the next year. Like you obviously want to send the seniors out on the right foot, but I think you can tell a lot and see a lot about your team based off of how they handle bowl week. Looking ahead to the next year, how are the younger players handling it? Are they taking that experience seriously? Because that also kind of shows you from a leadership standpoint how good of a job the seniors did, and kind of what the level of connection is there as far as like, hey, we want our seniors to go out on a high note. Now, this was definitely before NIL
Oh yeah,
and
yeah,
all this
yeah.
other kind of stuff right now. So, I can't speak to what it's been like for the last couple of years, but at least, like I said, when I was on the college side, that was always kind of how I looked at it. It was kind of the first game of the next year, and but also blending in and making sure your seniors go out on the right note, and also really I think the bowl prep period is kind of a special time too, because you get a chance. It's really your last chance to enjoy the seniors. For the most part, you've had them for, again, transfer portal is different now, but at that point, you had had them for 4 or 5 years for the most part, and you'd kind of help raise them up. I think that's the part of the recruiting side on college that I probably do miss. I would say is like the relationship and the responsibility you kind of have taking someone's son, taking someone's daughter from them on the parent side of thing, and that's kind of your role in some form or fashion for the time that they're with you. So that bull prep period kind of gives you one last month to hang out with them and enjoy them, and then also those that have a chance in playing in the NFL, it's your last chance to kind of impart some wisdom and kind of teach them how to do things right, whether it's how to maybe spend their money correctly, understanding what their kind of what the cohorts are doing. It's like, hey, maybe you do want to go away for a couple weeks and train at some of these other places and just kind of scope out, see what you're looking at. These other guys you're going to be competing with at the combine or at the NFL, like see what they can do well, steal a couple ideas, and then come back to home base and train back with the people you've been training with for 4 or 5 years. Or do you just want to stay here the whole time, or do you feel like it's best for you to go away and train away the whole time? It's having those conversations and trying to really like I said, impart your wisdom, but also let them know that it's kind of shifting more towards like we need to take football a little bit more seriously. Not that we weren't, but it's definitely kind of transitioning to the business side of it. And again, it's like it's your last chance to hang out with those guys, because it's like I'm sure you remember, like you go to college, you graduate and you go to college the first year, you come home for Christmas break and you're ready, and it's like, it's just not quite the same. So it's like, they're going to come back for spring ball and practice, and they may come back and check practice, but it's just never quite the same. And just enjoying that last little bit together.
So hearing you talk about that made me think back to when Doyle would be telling all the guys like, "Hey, graduation from that senior year to if you make it in your rookie, it is the longest year ever because they finish playing their bowl game, they have NFL combine prep, and then they go right to mini camp, and like then you hit that wall because your season usually ends." How true is that for any of our coaches that listen and work in college, and what would be your piece of advice to help prepare the athletes for what they'd be running into?
I think from a training standpoint, it's like a couple things that pop into my head is, I would say number one is just addressing the combine and addressing the pro day, right? So what they need to do to be prepared to perform well at the combine or perform well at their pro day is most likely not the same conditioning or performance level at what they're going to need to do to be able to succeed at the rookie minicamp. And so understand, like knowing who you are, knowing where you're going to fall, and kind of like where you're projected might change some of that. So for example, if you're going to be probably towards the top, you really need to, once that final pro day is over, that combine is over, working with your crew and figuring out what you're going to run for, what you're going to test, what you're going to not. But then conditioning needs to kind of come back in and be a piece of it.
Yep.
Because again, you're going to fall right into rookie mini camp, which is then going to kind of transition into OTA. So like everything kind of has its season, and they want to go, you need to go all in and perform your best, again, combine, pro day, whatever that looks like, but then kind of reading the room and figuring out what's best for you at a point of like, okay, when do I need to switch my training up and get back to it being about football? And, I would say the second piece would be, it is one of the first things we talk to our rookies about, and we try to remind them. And we have some people that do a great job, from an engagement standpoint and keeping our young guys locked in. But that season is long. I mean, you're by the time you would hit bowl prep in college, and for most intents and purposes, get 3 to 4 weeks, kind of reset, finals, take a breath, reset. Okay, let's go and try to win this last game. When that period hits, we still got another 5 or 6 games, and there's no break, and you're expected to perform well just as early as you were late. So, I mean, you look at the metrics, like you can definitely see a little bit of a fall off from a rookie standpoint. But a lot of that I think you can get ahead of is like, don't wait for it to get bad to get good. It's like start early in your year with a routine. Like don't wait for the soreness to mount up to get some massage or chiropractic work done or take regen a little bit more seriously, because you kind of get to that, not a point of no return, but kind of a point of no return where, but if you can get out ahead of it and kind of slow things down, it'll really help you there. Really help you there on the back end. Plus, the other thing too is like if you have processes in place, like the football is just it's such a bigger piece of it, and that in and of itself is going to take a lot of bandwidth for you to be able to pick up on what that looks like and the adjustments from week to week. So if you can have some processes in place where you can just kind of automate, Monday I do this, Tuesday I do this, Wednesday I do this, and then you can still allocate all your bandwidth to as much bandwidth as you can to football.
How about any of our strength coaches that are like, they have the ability to shape and mold those strength coaches, the athletes that are in college going to the pro level or even private sector ones? Like, what are some of the, best tips that they could be telling those athletes by the time combine training is done? Like, all right, you got to get them back doing conditioning. That's what we did at Iowa. That's what I did at Towson too. It's like, hey, pro day's done. Like you didn't touch conditioning. Now you're doing it. Like you got to be ready. And from what we used to tell them, you're going to be taking all the reps. You're the young guy. Like get in there and you need to be ready to go and perform. Is that the reality of it for most of them?
I think so. I mean, you don't want to be in a position where you're the new person and you're asking to sit stuff out.
Yep.
That's probably not a great look. And yeah, so I think definitely like they need to be ready to go. I would say kind of just continue to work on the mental side of it, as far as working on them, having a process, having something in place where they can kind of set things aside. I think nutrition is a massive component of this. I think sleep is a massive component of this. And it's one of those things where we know it, right? And we teach the athletes to it time and time again. And it's like, don't get tired of doing good, which sounds cheesy, but it's like, don't get tired of talking to them about sleep. Don't get tired of talking to them about nutrition, because just like anything else, you and I can have a conversation, right? And you're gonna walk away from this conversation with different things than what I'm going to.
Yep.
And everyone listening is the same way too. So it's like you might have said the same thing like 3 times, right? And maybe you said it in 3 different ways, but until you say it the 4th time in the 4th different way, it just might not click. So you're given an education talk about sleep, and you're reading the room, and it's like, okay, that person's locked in, that person's locked in, that person's not. This person is thinking about something else. This person just is mad they got the wrong flavored protein shake, and then and then you just kind of got to mentally check, okay, like that got like 40% of the audience. All right, now I'm going to run this back a month later, and I'm going to maybe say something a little bit differently. Okay, that got me 60% of the audience, right? Or I always loved in college was like the circle backs, right? Where you talk about something and you're like, man, I missed, like nobody was paying attention. And then you get like the 24-hour circle back where it's like, they just kind of happened to walk by your office and it was like, hey coach, when you were talking about so-and-so the other day, I'm like, yep, so I just think you just got to keep harping it. Cause like we're older than them. We're quote adults, right? Yeah. And we still don't do it consistently. All right. I mean, we definitely know better, but if you can continue to kind of harp on it, I think it helps.
That's a great point. And how do you, like, hearing you say that, it makes me wonder, like, how do you balance it? How would you recommend people balance between saying it enough, not saying it enough, but like being the noise rather than the signal that they're actually going to be able to hear, because you just keep harping it to death? Like, where does that balance lie, in your opinion?
What I would do, like I said, at Baylor, it's a little different in the NFL level, but on the college side of things is what I would do is let's say I talk about sleep, right, on Monday. And then maybe later on in the week, I'm going to say like, hey, Justin, we talked about sleep on Monday. Yeah. It's like, all right, so my message, your words, like coach me up. Like, I don't know anything about sleep. Like, what did you take away from that? Right. And then they're saying it back in the words that they're going to use when we're not around. Right. So they can, there's this different lingo, different terminology, sometimes like some different dialogue that's going to take place. And a lot of times, as long as you can get the main bullet points across, like they might be able to explain it better to each other than you can. You just got to figure out like who can relay the message the best, who kind of has the most clout within that group. And then if you can get that person on board, then everything else becomes easily. But I always like to hear it. There's been numerous times it's like, hey, this and this and this. Okay. All right. Now I want you to say back to me what I just said to you in your own words. And it's like, whoa, like that's what you got from this? Like I do it with my kids all the time and it's absolutely fascinating. And I'm like, man, I am a terrible communicator. It's like, that is not what I said at all, but okay. Like, all right, we need to work on this. So, but if you can get them to say back to you what again, like your message or whatever it is, or, intentionally kind of like maybe stop half a sentence early and see if they can start to finish your sentences, then I think you're kind of on the right path. And you just gotta be okay beating it into their head. And then, yeah, coach, I got it. Like when you get to that point, it's probably like time to chill out for a second.
That's a good point. You kept talking about Baylor and whether you're going to be the one to say it or not. I am. I've followed your work for a while, love what you do, think you do a fantastic job, and everybody has continued to talk very highly of you ever since CVASP and everything. For you, looking back on your time in college, I felt like you were a pioneer with respect to the high performance manager role. Kind of talk about that, but then also talk about how you've seen things grow and where you see the future of it going.
You need CEUs to remain certified. At Strength Coach Network, both of our long-form education courses, Fundamentals 1 and Fundamentals 2, both have 2.0 CEUs to the NSCA in Category C. When you complete the learning and you complete the learning check, you will earn your 2.0 CEUs. That is 33% of the CEUs you need in a 3-year reporting period. Click the link down below to learn more about both courses.
So I think really the first thing with the high performance role is you got to have really good people in those departments that you're working with, right? That's number one. So Carolina, Jeremy Scott, Kate Calloway, Ryan Belleros, Tom Barbeau, Tim Rabbis, Corey Miller, and then even all the way down to our chef Tracy here at the Panthers. Like we're all on the same page. We all meet. We all talk. So I think the communication aspect of it is a big thing. For me, it all just kind of started was like, it was not like a needs assessment, but like you kept kind of seeing things like slip through the cracks, or it's like there would maybe be something strength conditioning wise that got relayed a little bit later, sports science wise that got relayed a little bit late. And it's like, man, if they would have known this ahead of time, that really would have helped. And so then that kind of morphed into, it's okay, well, can we set some structured meetings in place? Can we have some informal touch points in place to where we can just kind of connect the building, right? And honestly, here is like, I think the best way I've heard it explained was connect the building with your feet. And so a good chunk of my day is just kind of having conversations, bebopping around, talking to different people in the building, whether it's security, whether it's the janitor, whether it's, obviously the departments that we talked about, equipment managing, whatever it is. But just kind of trying to stay on top of stuff, staying out in front of things. There's things that happen every year that you can prepare for. And sometimes having those, again, when you're moving around and having those conversations, you can find out some things and get some stuff that allows you to be proactive and get out in front of stuff. Or, hey, have you talked to so-and-so about this? Because I think that they could really help there. And then, connecting other departments. But it started out as a need, and then it just kind of evolved from there. When I say need, I shouldn't say need. It was more of like a want. It was something that I'm like, I feel like I could do a good job at this. What does it look like now? And it kind of started out, what was it, like around 2011, 2012 with some of the GPS stuff.
Yep.
At that point I was very heavy strength conditioning and was just kind of looking for like, what's next? Like, where's this going to go? Like, because Like sets and reps are sets and reps, and they're important. And exercise selection and all that stuff is important. But like we still, at that point, in my opinion, for the most part, as a profession, not doing a great job of like triangulating the target, right? And so, is it 4x6 or 6x6 or 5x6? It's like it doesn't matter because we don't know the target. Like what are we trying to prepare them for? So then GPS becomes a part of it, right? So then you add in the GPS, and it's like, okay, this is this is the target, and then a mega wave, utilizing a mega wave TMG. So then it's like now you can see kind of how the body's responding. So if the body's not responding well, we might have done too much. If the body's responding easily, then we can probably do more. Then looking at the Gabbett stuff where it's 25% spikes, and well, what happens if we're doing this 25% spike and mega waves suck, and athlete questionnaires aren't they're not responding well in the questionnaires? Then maybe this is the wrong point to make that big of a jump, and just trying to kind of put all those pieces and then coordinating it. And I feel like I'm kind of all over the place, but I feel like that's kind of my job some days. It's just like we're all over the place, and it's like just trying to find ways to connect the dots and help the athletes out, and relaying information from kind of group to group. And but again, like formal processes, scheduled meetings, structured meetings, and then connecting the building through your feet. But then also understanding every day you're probably going to have to solve probably 3 to 4 problems on a given day that you may not have seen coming or you did see coming. Mm-hmm. And you got to plan for probably 30 to 45 minutes worth of interruptions. And so, if you can do those things, then again, that allows you to get out in front of it, where it's like, if you plan on being distracted and you plan on having to solve problems every day, then you can go to work with a much, I don't know, more of I guess maybe a resilient mindset, as opposed to like, oh, another problem. Oh, another problem. Oh, another problem. And like that stuff, and just that mindset, like it can wear on you after a while if you're not ready for it. But it's like, that's also like, it's part of my job is to solve problems and help people solve their problems. Again, it's like the people that are in these departments are really, really good at what they do. So it's like hop in, help them solve a problem, and then kind of move on to the next thing. And a lot of times it's not really helping them solve problems. Sometimes it's just listening. And again, like connecting maybe one area to another area. And again, like I'll just hit it again, but like being proactive and getting out in front of stuff can save a lot of problems.
How can strength coaches best do that, get those roles? Because I feel like a lot of the times it is athletic training driven, and I'm not here to differentiate the two. I'm just how to advocate for strength coaches to get those positions for longevity. What's the, best practice?
I think you have to know what you don't know. I think you have to be okay saying that you don't know things. I remember I've had like working with, I had the opportunity to work with Matt Rule for quite a while. Right. And I remember I'll say one of my first, but towards the beginning of our relationship, he asked me a question. I didn't know the answer. And I was like, Coach, like, I'm going to be honest, like, I don't know, but I'll find the answer when I get back to you. He's like, that's a great answer. And I was like, really? He's like, yeah, the amount of times where people will say they know something they don't know. And it's like that. I think that's the thing when you're dealing with a head coach or an athletic director or a GM or whatever. It's like, being willing to say, you know what, I don't know. I'm going to find the right answer. I don't have it right now, but I'll get back to you. And I think a lot of people aren't willing to do that. Their ego is kind of tied into the answer. And it's like they'd rather be right instead of be right. And I know that's, like I said the same thing twice, right? You're like, what? But I would rather like us do the right thing in the long run than like the answer I say be the right answer, right? Like there's still like the best way to do something. And so again, like I think listening to everybody, but also you just got to be like genuinely curious. So if you're a strength coach and you want to tie in nutritionally, right? Like there's things that you can do. There's things that you can read. If having a relationship with your athletic training, having a relationship with your physical therapist, having a relationship with your doctors, and getting in there and asking questions, because it's like, you don't have to know. I don't have to know that stuff as well as what the doctor is. Like, I'm not a doctor, right? And I'm never going to be. But like, I think collectively, like we need to all know enough to where we can catch the bullshit in when other people are talking, right? So whether what it is, like, I don't even know everything, but it's like, that doesn't quite sound right. Like, like let's go back and let's see if we can find a better way to do it. And then again, as long as it's about finding the right answer and not being right, then I think that takes a lot of the guard down of this is me, this is my area, this is what I do. Like, cool. But if you look at like things on the business side, on the corporation side, like a decent amount of the time, innovation in those areas comes from someone outside the area because they're not dealing with the dogmatic rules that apply to that relationship. And so it's like people can come into your area and not really know about it and just ask it, hey, well, what about this? And you're just like, well, I don't know. Like,
that's a great question.
I did it because my boss did it, or I did it because of a book I read 10 years ago. It's like, well, has something evolved since then? Like, barbells have been around for a while. Dumbbells have been around for a while. That means they probably work. Right. But if this thing has only been around for a handful of years, like, does it really work that well, or can we find a better way to do it?
Do you think that coaches, is the goal then to try to obtain certifications in other people's domains, becoming a licensed massage therapist, nutrition, whatever, or is it to truly just delegate, subordinate yourself to understanding, I don't know everything, but I trust this person and they're a really good person to help me?
Yeah. Like I don't think that you can, like, I couldn't do what I do here if I didn't have complete trust for the crew that I work with. That I think like that's first and foremost. I do think you need to somehow show some content related knowledge if you expect to, kind of whatever, oversee or direct these other areas. But again, it's like, if you have a good relationship with those people and you view it's not about me being in charge. It's about us finding the right answer. It's about us finding the best way to do it. So it's like, cool, this is your area. That's your area. Like, you're great, really good at that. I'm not quite as good as all of these things, but I know enough about all these things to where like, I kind of know where the pitfalls. And then again, if there's a relationship in place, then you're willing to share with me where issues are. And then I can help kind of step in and solve problems. And then, I think the other thing too, and I would recommend this to anyone, regardless of the sport, is like some of the best stuff that I've ever done was with Olympic sports between Valdosta State and Baylor. And so, again, being right in the long term, not being right in the short term. But like the cool part of this is like, let's say right now you just do football and that's all you do, right? And that's cool and that's fine. And let's say you work football for 10 years. So you have 10 seasons worth of experience. Okay. Now, let's say you're a director of Olympic sports somewhere and there's 20 Olympic sports there. But realistically, let's say you just work with like 10 of them, right? And I worked there for 10 years, right? Well, I have 100 seasons of experience over a 10-year period. That's thousands of athletes. That's 3 to 4 to 5 coaches per sport, right? Which I've, working on building relationships with, or, hey, I'm going to steal that. Hey, I'm going to steal that. That was silly. Ooh, I liked how they broke the team down there. Like, damn, that was a tough loss. I wonder what their coach is going to say. Like, that was a great win. I wonder what the coach is going to do to keep them humble. And so you get involved in these Olympic sports, and it's like, I feel like it's just really underutilized. It's like, there's a lot of people, it's like, I want to be the football guy. It's like, cool, but, and all I do is football now, right? Obviously. But like all of the Olympic sport work as absolutely fundamental, and I would not be where I'm at, being able to maneuver the way that I maneuver without all of that experience. I mean, even going back to, I remember back at Valdosta State training tennis, or Baylor training tennis, and understanding like who that clientele is. You're going to have a lot of foreign students, right? And English is not the primary language in some cases, and the music's blaring in the weight room, and it's like, you better get good at demoing, because the English doesn't always translate. It's like little things like that. So then you're rocking a football group, and now the music's twice as loud and nobody can hear what's going on, but it's like, you better, like learning. It's like, I got to demo this. I need to demo this. And so it's the training. And again, like that's 100 seasons worth of experience that you just can't replicate. And then also times when you're working those Olympic sports, like you don't have the big budget, like you got to find a way to make it work. And you got to turn the parking lot into a speed and conditioning session. And you know what I mean? Like I've done it. Like I did that stuff at Valdosta State. Like we were training out of an elementary school gym for one summer, and you in the football field or wherever we were going to run it was half a mile away, and it's like you can't get that both in one training session. So like the creativity that's kind of forced upon you, and then again like learning how to build relationships, and then trying to learn a sport that you know nothing about, but building relationships with the athletes where it's like, listen, I'm going to coach you up and I'm going to teach you how to train. This is going to be fun. And what I need in return is you gotta coach me up on tennis. Like I don't know anything about like coaching me up on equestrian. Like there's two different things going on right now. Like they're here, they're there. You're wearing different. You're on the same team, but you're wearing different uniforms. Like what is going on? How is this scored? And then it's like, okay, well if I know how equestrian scored, then I kind of start to understand what's important, which then leads me back to how I need to train you, right? And then, yeah, I'm sorry, I'm ranting, but it's just. It's something that, like, for me, really, I will always be incredibly grateful for all of the time I spent training and working with Olympic sports.
I feel the exact same way, and I was fortunate to have that happen at Towson. Yeah, I was the head football guy, but I had other teams that I worked with. And when I was at Maryland with Drew Wilson, I was the assistant with football, but I was in charge of sports, men's and women's cross country, for the exact reason that you said. So that way I had to program, I had coaches, I had athletes, and it wasn't just I'm doing what Drew says. You actually have skin in the game and you're learning how to do that stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. It's incredibly important, incredibly valuable. And again, like, working with coaches, like coaches across different sports, and you can say what you want about this sport and that sport and Title IX, but like their sport is the most important sport to them.
Yep. 100%.
And so when it's time to train that sport, like you need to lock in and train them like it's the most important sport. Like you work football and this other, like they don't care about football when you're training them. They care about their sport, and you got to be able to lock in and make sure you're doing that. Be where your feet are and train the heck out of that team when you're training it, regardless of who it is.
Now, one question that I have from you from a detached point of view, not specifically with your team, but with other teams from a global perspective, I feel like within the high performance team, with people making recommendations to sport coaches, at what point does the sport coach then ultimately come back and be like, well, at what point do I get to make a decision about the team? Like with all these recommendations, when can the sport coach actually do their thing? And these are questions that I start to ask myself now that I have this detached point of view too.
I think it just really needs to be like just a lot of synergy there between the two of you, and then I also think like you have to find ways to incorporate like the ops crew and the equipment crew too, as maybe different as that sounds, but the operations crew, they're the ones that are kind of for the most part probably setting the schedule or working with the coach on the other 80% of the schedule that's not the practice and that isn't maybe the way that it's sequenced. So it's like just understanding there's a lot of people that are kind of working at it and trying to get the best plan. I think I've been very fortunate to work with sport coaches that are open-minded and again wanting to find the best way, not necessarily be the right way. Also, I think you've got to read the room at times too, and you got to know like what's the hill worth dying on and what isn't. And it just like to be serious. It's like,
yeah, no, you're right.
I mean, like, okay, 5 minutes here, there, like, okay, don't care. Like 10 minutes, 15, now we're talking, right? And, do we go inside or do we go outside? It's like, well, what temperature should the indoor be? How long should this period be? Again, I think it's in a matter of a couple minutes or 5 minutes, like not that big of a deal. But if we're talking 15 minutes plus, now that becomes a big deal. I think, I also think this is like, you got to get up. I keep talking about being proactive, but you got to get on from that stuff early. It's like, talk to the coach right away. He's like, hey, what are your non-negotiables? They're A, B, and C. Okay, cool. What mode of communication do you prefer? Like, are you face-to-face? Are you over the phone? Are you email? Are you text message? Most coaches are not email. Again, like going back to Baylor, it's like a lot of coaches view email as like a CYA thing on our behalf, right? And so you gotta remember that as part of the relationship building process. It's like, hey, like we're in this thing together. So hey, it's text message first, and then it's phone call, or it's phone call first, and then it's text message, or it's face to face, and whatever. And so when you get the kind of the way that the coaches want to be communicated with and what works best for them, then that's kind of the first step in showing that you want to find a way to make this work. And like again, I've been very fortunate to work with really good coaches, but I think you gotta the meeting in the middle or turning them loose and letting them do what they want to do. Like, to me, that those are conversations you got to have on day one, like figuring out non-negotiables, and then understanding like, if everything's important, nothing's important. And if I'm, hey, I'm worried about these 20 guys today. Like, really? 20 of them? Like, okay, that seems like a lot. So, dialing in your processes, whether it's the data gathering from a Nordboard or a growing bar or a GPS, or it's data gathering from talking to the athletic trainers, or it's data gathering talking to the athletes, like really doing your homework from conversation, data, soreness, and putting all these things together, and then shooting your shot when you know you're right, and not letting, I don't know, I'll say power for lack of a better word, but I don't really mean it. Yeah. But like not letting that stuff go to your head where it's like, whatever I do, like coach is going to follow, like, great. But like, do you really need to intervene at this moment? Like, you want to make sure that when you're intervene, it's necessary. So for me, like, year one is Fergus Connolly taught me this my first year here, but he said year one is all about not losing credibility.
Ooh.
And there's so much truth to that, right? Like, we're not trying to change the world, but like what we're not going to do is like, I'm not going to lose credibility. Like, I'm going to do it. We're going to do what we want. We're going to have honest conversations, and we're gonna do the right thing. But I'm not going to make some silly, crazy, off the wall recommendation with the hope it might work, so I can end up looking really, really smart. Like, that is a recipe for disaster. So it's like, hit on the things that work. Rely on the things that work, kind of get the ball rolling, and then you can build from there. Like, there's an article that I'm going to pronounce the guy's name wrong, so I won't say it, but there's an article I read every year. It's called One Big Thing, and it goes back into like horse racing and whatnot. And basically this guy found out that the size of a horse's heart was the biggest predictor for winning. And now since then they've gone on to prove or disprove and add a bunch of other metrics and whatever that may be. But maybe it's just as simple as in year one, we're going to pick 1 to 2 things, and this is what we're going to hang our hat on, and this is what we're going to say is important. And then maybe you get through OTAs or you get through spring ball, and now we're talking about high-speed yardage. And now we're talking about player load. But at first, like, maybe let's just talk about time on feet and kind of dialing in on what the time on feet should look like, and making sure we're out there an appropriate amount of time. And I think a lot of times too, like, you got to be willing to push. I think what happens now, and I'm speaking in general. I'm not necessarily speaking about what's happened in my career, but I'm seeing it like across the board is, when I look at when people send me stuff to look at, I think there's an overall, like, a lack of poise when it comes to high days. Like, the high days are high. We all agree this is going to be high. Like, let's go get this thing. And then you got to have the courage to sit back on the low days and let the low days be low. Because then otherwise what happens is everything ends up becoming medium. And if I'm preparing, if you're preparing them for a 4-hour tennis match or a 3.5-hour football game or whatever it may be, like, there's an aspect where, like, they got to get used to being on their feet for that long. And you can't do that if you're only practicing for 75 minutes or 90 minutes, right? Now, that being said, there's some constraints put in place, NCAA, NFL, where it's like practice lengths, right? So if I can't get to 4 hours or 3.5 hours, but if I can stack those on back-to-back days, then I could at least get it on back-to-back days, or, however that may look. But I think, you got to go when it's time to go. You got to have and the poise to convince everybody to do it. And then you got to have the courage to say, like, hey, we said low. Like, low doesn't mean we add this in, or low doesn't mean we add in a couple extra sets of this in the weight room, and low doesn't mean we add in this extra yardage. Like, low is low, right? And so kind of that's where I think can be helpful is like dialing in on percentages, knowing your volume calculations. That's something we had instilled to me a long time ago by Johnny Parker and Rob Panarello with the volume calculations. And that to me has been fundamental to what I do. But then also talking to some other coaches around the league, it's and really around the college side too, is, and when it's time to go, we got to go. Now you got to make sure that they can handle it. but then we need to be patient on these other days too, and allow time for the adaptations to occur and kind of let everything catch back up, right? Otherwise, we're going to drive this thing off the rails. But again, like I do think there are times when practices could definitely be harder, but you can only do that if you have the courage and the willingness to sit tight and pull back on those low days.
Do you also think that could be because coaches might see, oh my gosh, GPS was high, HRV, they haven't recovered, and so they're afraid to do it the very next time because they don't understand that they need those days for the adaptation to be driven? Like, could that be part of the reason?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think it's part of it. You look at it, it's like, holy cow, everybody flagged on this day. The last time we did it, and it's like, well, we actually needed them to,
Exactly.
and then working on the analyst side of things, you can also have those type of people figure out what is the appropriate amount before athletes do start flagging, right? And then if you're having too many people flag, then odds are your stuff is not sensitive enough, right? So you look into like sensitivity, specificity, positive, predictive, and then like the negative predictive stuff, and you can get into there and kind of help triangulate, what you're doing. So it's like, I live 30 minutes south of Charlotte. I live in Rock Hill. And if you were going to land at the airport and come visit me, which would be fun, right? So you want to come visit me. And I'm like, hey, once you land the plane, just go get a rental and drive down to Rock Hill. It's like, great. Like, you got to Rock Hill, but you may not be anywhere near my house. And then I say, take this exit, turn on this street, and you slowly get closer and closer to my house. And like, to me, that's what the GPS is, right? And that's what, okay, I'm getting you a little bit closer. Hey, this is kind of a long drive. You might want to fill up with gas along the way, or watch out for there's always a cop right here. Right? Like, those are the things as part of the training session is like, hey, we're going to push it, but just so you know, like, if we're not smart nutritionally, we might lose a hamstring over these next couple of days because we went and got after it, right? And that's the cop, right? So, yeah, I think it's like it's the triangulation of the process. It's trying to figure things out and kind of diving things in as time goes by, and then also having the conversation on the coaches. Again, conversations in the front is like, hey, coach, we're going to go. And just so you know, like, this is a period where we typically lose more people during this period than what we would like, but it happens across the board. And hey, across the NFL, this is typically an injury-heavy week, or hey, the NFL has found this, and you can kind of go from there. Like, you get into training camp, you're going to have camp groins, you're going to have camp hamstrings. Those aren't fatal things, but then where it gets tricky is understanding what that does to the rest of your roster. And how that stuff can snowball down, right? So I got to sit a guy for a day or two, or I have let's say a player's got a vet day. Well, what does that do to the rest of his position group, right? How is that going to affect the loading? How is that going to affect the next couple of days? So I'm going to protect these certain players, and we're going to look at these certain guys that we want to look at. But everyone's important collectively as a whole. So a vet day shouldn't come at the expense of some other player on the roster or the rest of the position group, which gets really tricky.
You could have like four. You could say, "Oh, we only had 4 groins," but if it's to the linebacking group, it's like, "Well, shit." That, like, an outsider could be like, "Oh, you only had 4 groins over 4 weeks." You're like, "Yeah, but it was to one position group, and that's why it kept happening, right?"
100%, right?
For you and somebody that's been around for a long time, what still drives you? What still pushes you? What still motivates you or provides the discipline to do what you do and reach the high level and care amount that you do? Because anybody listening right now might be like, well, shoot, if I reach the success that he did, I might just kick my feet up and be done. But like, you still have tons of passion. You can hear it with what you're talking about. What is that for you?
I still haven't found the right answer. Like, no, like, whatever that I haven't, like, it's like golf, man. Like, you can go out and you can, I'm a 9-hole golfer. I don't do 18. I don't have I'm a great 9-hole golfer. I get to hole 12 and the wheels come off. So, like, I'm a 9.
But then on hole 18, you do great because it's setting you back in.
Yeah, maybe, but probably not. So it's like, I'm a 9-hole golfer, bro. And, like, knowing I'm a 9-hole golfer, like, I can shoot 40. Right. But there's still like, I missed that putt. If I wouldn't have missed that fairway, it's like, so I haven't, and again, like, we're doing everything collectively. So it's like, we still haven't designed the perfect practice. We still haven't designed the perfect week. Like, we can still tweak the way we do training camp. We can still tweak a joint practice. We can still tweak our travel schedule. Like we're going to travel to Germany this year. Like, what does that look like? Like, I still get to learn that. So for me, it's all about like putting myself in position where my learning curve is still steep. Like when my learning curve flattens out, like I get bored, and I got to like find something else to like take over my brain and obsess over. But for me, it's like I still haven't found the right answer. And like career wise, like my ultimate career goal, and this is going to sound cheesy, and I'm going to say it out loud, but it's like I really want to change the way that football is like trained, periodized, progressed in the U.S. And I don't feel like I'm anywhere near to doing that, which I know is like this kind of like a weird goal, but it's like there's just so many more lessons that I can learn, and so many more things that I can do to get better at not only what I do, but like make the perfect season, like the perfect practice, the perfect week, the perfect travel, the perfect training camp, the perfect off season. It's like there's just still like way too much for me to learn to like sit here and feel really like any source of accomplishment. Like I still have the same amount of anxiety I did when I was a GA at Valdosta State, and when I started off at Baylor as a glorified intern. It's like there's still like wake up every morning like, all right, we got to go, and then also I think just understand like where I came from. Like my dad was a milk truck driver, so he'd drive around to the farm and pick up milks and take it to the factory. He did that for over 40 years. My mom was a real mail carrier, did that for over 30 years. And so like when I look at what they do, I'm like, that's work, right? Like that's work. Like this is not work. Like no. It's stressful at times, but it's not work. So it's like, it's going to keep jamming, solving problems, trying to figure things out and really kind of like change the way that football's looked at and football's trained. Because again, I think, people kind of loop me in maybe more sports sciencey than strength coachy. Those aren't words, but
sure they are. They are in our world.
we made it a word. But I do think that like people need to understand like my background and everything I do is rooted in strength conditioning. Like, I mean, I've read everything that I could get my hands on when I was a young coach, and so but that drives the periodization of practice, right? And it's like the things you learn when you're writing programs is, you're doing a warm-up, right? It's like slow to fast, general to specific. Like it's the same way with structuring practice, right? Slow to fast, general to specific, like, indie, which leads into maybe 7-on-7 and 1-on-1, which leads into a team period. Like those things still build, like there's still a rhythm to it, right? It's kind of like this song that you're trying to write, and you're trying to write this perfect song, but like all these pieces have to work together.
Now, so what does that ideal picture look like? And again, I'm not from a 10,000 foot view, like how would you go about piecing it together? And is it just solving the NFL puzzle, or are you looking at like, how can that college and high school like morph into it and make it better? Like, where do you see that?
Looking to expand your education further, but you don't want to pay the massive fees of going back to school? At Strength Coach Network, we have 2 long-form education courses that both cost less than one course taught to you by an online school. If you click down below to learn more about Fundamentals 1 or Fundamentals 2, you will be able to sign up for our education course that has over 20 hours of educational content brought to you by some of the biggest names in the field. Dr. Brian Mann, Zach Daycant, Jeff Moyer, Terrence Kennel, and many more inside of this course, all for less than the price of one course at a college university.
That's quite the question. I feel like this is a therapy session.
Maybe it's a therapy session for me, because like personally, when I've looked at like, okay, how would I analyze an NFL season? I'd start to think like, what are my non-negotiables? Like, all right, if I'm living in right now, I live in the Midwest. All right, so if we have any trips, like you said, if we're going to Germany, if we have any international stuff, if we're going on a long coast, if we have a short week, a Sunday to Thursday, whatever, like start looking at these non-negotiable highest risk and then work backwards from there. And then you do the same thing with respect to long periods of training off. Like, is that how you go about doing it, or like, what does it look like?
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously like the ultimate goal is for guys to win football games.
Win the game, period.
Winning period. Right? So what can we do within our areas to help us win football games? Well, I mean, I think the number one thing is, guys got to be available, right? And for me, it's like I'm gonna keep track of man games lost. So
Yep. Same.
who's available. I'm gonna look at man games lost. I'm gonna look at how quickly we can get guys back. So
Same. Yep.
if it's a 4 to 6 hamstring, then we want to fight to make that closer to 4, right? So I think like those are some easy ways to win. So it's like the most amount of football games that you can win with the least amount of carnage along the way, and the least amount of disruption to the roster. But then you also got to understand where your roster is at that time, and the roster you have now isn't the roster you're going to have a few years from now. Like I went and looked at this when I was back at Baylor, but it's like honestly, like I'll make sure I say it right, but most rosters for the most part are somewhat consistent on the college side of things, like certain percentage of seniors and juniors and sophomores and freshmen. As far as like contributing, if you look at like you go and look at like the participation report, right? Like who's actually playing in the game.
Yep.
That type of stuff doesn't move a lot. And again, it may have moved with NIL and transfer portal, and I'm acknowledging that, but that is something to go and look at. Because I remember I was told once, and I think it really holds a lot of truth, is like when you're being recruited, like you're being expected to, contribute as a sophomore, but kind of being like a real like role player and a good contribution by the time you're a junior. Well, in the NFL, you can go get someone that's a 7-year, 8-year, 9-year, 10-year vet, and so when you get those guys on your roster, you have to handle them differently. Things happen when as athletes get older. So on the college side, you're almost looking at it like you're on this upward trajectory, and you're trying to get athletes close to the season while still leaving meat on the bone, right? Because if you get too aggressive on the college side of things, you can end up like in the short term they may perform better, but in the long run you might be taking some mileage. You put a little maybe too much mileage on their tires for what they're ready for, and there's only so much of that they have. And then on the NFL side, you're trying to flatten that out on the backside as much as you can, and trying to increase their availability and the longevity of their careers. And honestly, like those things aren't. But that being said, like what it takes to win a football game hasn't changed, right? If this one team is more fast, powerful, and explosive than the other one, then they might have
probably going to win the game.
Probably increased likelihood of winning the game, right? So, but doing that with a 28-year-old is different than doing that with an 18-year-old, right? And then understanding where they came from, and the longer they're around, then more likelihood of injury history and things like that.
What's been the biggest aha moment to helping you do that? Has it been a piece of technology? Has it been a movement? Has it been a series of things that you've been like, man, this was something that light bulb went off. I might have learned it 2 years ago and I started to apply it, but what has been that light bulb moment for you?
So after the 2020, I'll say there's been a lot, but I'll give this example. Was after the 2020 season, we went in and we looked at the end of the season, players who had surgery or ended up on IR or had a significant injury at some point in the year. And the commonality was there was a certain threshold, whether it be player load or high-speed yardage or we call them explosive movements, but like change the direction, like
yep.
Stop, start, turn left, turn right.
Yep.
There was just a certain threshold that was, and it moved by position group, that when athletes passed it, whether it was a daily average or it was the total for training camp, when they passed this number, it significantly increased, likelihood of them getting hurt.
Uh-huh.
And that being said, like there's still a certain goal you got to prepare them for the first game of the year. So going in and using these, we ended up just calling them red lines, but now that you find out where these red lines are for these different metrics, and no matter what you're trying to get them ready for a football game, tennis match, basketball, whatever, there's only so much an athlete can handle at any given point. And so using things, again, like Omega Wave, we've been playing around with Thermohuman the last couple of years, like it can really help give you a snapshot as far as like what they're ready for at that given moment. And so as you're progressing, and you know what they can handle at that time of, hey, maybe we need to slow this down a little bit. Maybe we can speed it up a little bit. But we know that overall we have to stay underneath this threshold, right? So like, let's say, I'm going to make a number up, but like, let's say it's a player load of 100, right? So you use Catapult's metric, and when a player has over 100 for a player load, like they have an increased risk of injury. Well, or per practice, but I still have to get them ready for a game that may be a player load of X.
Yep.
So how can I do that while still keeping the average under 100, right? And then that's when the fun begins.
Yeah, and with respect to like any of those, the recovery stuff, I always remembered Mike Boyle talking about it back in the day, where he's like, look, if you overly dive into it, like what if Johnny wants to just not train and, stays up and, has a bad omega wave reading? Like, have you seen coaches talk to you about it? Not you specifically, but are coaches coming to you saying that, and they're like, oh, do you let the data drive? Like, is it data driven, data informed? How do you see that work?
I think that stuff's important, and I also feel like there's times where you need to ignore it.
Correct.
But
I feel correct. Yeah.
if you know the rules, let's say you put the rules in place, right? The speed limit's 55, and I can speed every now and then. I can drive 60, I can drive 65, I can drive 70, and I can get away with it, right?
Yep.
But the more often that I drive too fast, the more likely it is that at some point that cop is going to catch me and pull me over, right? And so you just got to know, you got to put the rules in place, right? These kind of, we'll say constraints, right? Practice should be this, or no many more reps than that, or high speed yards should be whatever. And then there's going to be times where we're like, you know what? Like, I know I shouldn't be speeding, but I really got to get to the gas station before it closes to get diapers. And I'm going to run this risk, bro. I'm going to run it. But you just got to know you do that too often. At some point, you're going to get caught. So you got to be really strategic on when you do it. Like, okay, we're going to go speeding today, but they have tomorrow off. Or we're going to go speeding today, but tomorrow's a low day. We're going to go speeding today, but they got to catch this flight and got to get out of town. So we're going to be really smart with what they do. But then this way they can still get the training session in and still kind of go live their life. And there's just times where you got to compromise.
Right now, I think that zone 2 is the new, what used to be fly 10. Everybody was fly 10. What's your fly 10, bro? Now everybody's doing zone 2 cardio. What do you think is the next trend or the next thing that strength coaches are going to be talking about, and why? And if you're like, it's not zone 2, like, what do you think it is, or where has kind of these trend things come and gone in your opinion?
I'll kind of take your question and flip it a little bit. What I would like to see, the next piece of technology I would like to see, is an accurate way to gather heart rate that players can reasonably use within competition and or practice, and not have to deal with it. So for example, like right now, if I want to get an accurate heart rate, like I probably have to wear the strap around my chest.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Well, if I got shoulder pads on, that's not ideal. Right.
Nope.
And now if I got shoulder pads on and I'm doing 1-on-1 pass rush, like, or 9-on-7, like that's definitely not ideal. Right. So the amount of pucks that we've had to pick up can get frustrating and annoying, or then like players get tired of it, because like that's not a comfortable thing to have.
No.
But if you could reasonably get a reliable heart rate in a manner where the athletes would be compliant in using it, like I think the data coming from that would be massively important. I also feel like I think there is some value in things like the Oura rings, and I'm going to get shot for saying this. I do think that there's value in some of that stuff, but you got to know what you're looking at, and you got to know what the limitations of it are. Just kind of like if you know the rules and you can break the rules, It's like you got to know kind of, what the limitations of the technology are and what you're getting from it. So like, let's say, all right, Justin, we're gonna weigh you today, right? And you hop on the scale, and I'm gonna make a number up, so don't be offended. You're 198, and you really want to be 200, right? So you hop on the scale, you're 198, and you're like, tough, bro, don't write this down. I'll be right back. And you go chug a water and eat a breakfast burrito, and you come back and you're 200.5. And you're like, okay, write that down. And so which number am I writing down? Right? Like I can tell you I'm writing down that, but I might write down the other one. And so it's like the act of measuring something changes what you're measuring. As soon as I say I'm writing this body weight down, the body weight changes in your mind. Like the importance of it changes and whatever. So I'm not actually like I got the real body weight because I saw the 198, but I didn't really get the real body weight. Like odds are you're probably somewhere between 198 and 202, and like there's a range of performance that you should probably be in. But again, as soon as you start measuring it, it changes the metrics, and I think that's something that people really need to understand when it comes to limitation of technology, or really just in general limitation of the metrics you're looking at. If you're doing a questionnaire and you're asking how stiff and sore they are, and you're gonna, I got the answer at Baylor all the time, like, Coach, I'm a 1, I'm great. It's like, really? Like, you look like I saw you get out of your car, bro. Like, you look pretty sore. He's like, Coach, I'm a 1, man. I don't get tired. I'm like, all right, man, you're a 1. Like, cool, you're a 1. And he's always a 1, right? And then halfway through the season, one day we're doing the questionnaire, and the athlete writes down a 3. Now a 3, now it's like, okay, something's going on because you're always a 1, and now you put down a 3. Like, I either caught you on a good day, or like you are miserable, like you are really, really sore, right? So I think understanding your players, kind of knowing the natural fluctuation, but understanding kind of the limitations of what you're looking at. So it's like you're putting rules in place, and you're putting constraints in place, and then you're going to break them, right? And then I'm going to put this technology in place to monitor it. But I also know that it's not always 100% accurate in every case. So, but I think that's where, as a coach, like, you're getting paid to navigate the gray area, and that's what they're paying us for. If it was all black and white, then it is what it is, and anyone could do our job. But you got to navigate the gray area and understand what you're trying to get that day. Hey, guy's really sore on his lower body. Should he train today? No, we're lifting upper body. It's fine. He'll be fine. And kind of trying to find the ways to maneuver and play within that gray area.
Yeah, because that makes me think about like Goddard's law, right? Like whatever you start to measure, maybe now the diminishing returns of it. So if you're gonna, continue to measure return to like any of the return to play metrics, it now doesn't. It's not as important anymore because now that's the target. And I've always tried to figure out like, how much do you harp on making sure that that's the metric that truly does show improved performance. And that's why I'm getting all tongue tied, because it's like, what is that quest? What is that ultimate thing that you can then say, but it doesn't have that diminishing returns on the back end?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's the thing too. It's like this, it's like we were talking about before, like the perfect golf score. Like what's the best thing that you can do at your job? Well, you win on the
holy
football
grail
game,
that you're chasing.
You win every football game and no players get hurt. Like, great. You win, you played 9
and then you did that 1 week, you're like, all right, we got to do it again. Like,
whatever, Like
I'm going to just stop coaching right now.
Yeah, you shot a 9. Congratulations.
What would be your piece of advice right now for a young strength and conditioning coach? So this would be somebody who's either end of their senior year in college, they're an intern, they're a GA, or they just got their first job. Somebody super young and green. What's your advice to them right now?
Dig into like the classic books and don't get off social media. Not from a don't you can post your training, all that kind of stuff. I don't care about that, but I'm saying like get into some books, like some books that have been around for a while. Like the Bible's been around for a while because it's a really good book and it's got a bunch of lessons in there and religion and all these other kind of things. But like there are some foundational strength and conditioning books that I think like everyone should have on their bookshelf. And especially as a young coach, like you got to read the stuff that's been around for a while. Read the stuff that all these new articles, when we're renaming this article, this new exercise, it's like, bro, that's been around for a while. But it's got a cool new name, So, read the old stuff. Read the old stuff.
You sound like Bob Alejo's his cheeky midweekie's out this week, and we talked about it on the show where his whole saying is, tell me what you call it now, and I'm going to tell you what we called it back in the day. Because, when you don't do your research, and that's something that Jeff Moyer's talked about on the show before too, like actually dive into the research. And so here's some practical advice that Jeff talked about. Anybody that's listening, if you find a good research paper, you find a good book, go and then look in the references and find out where they learned it from. So that way you can keep pulling back the layers of it and understand things.
Yeah. I think too, is like, I'd say the other piece would be just kind of zoom out and make sure you really are doing what you want to do. And in order to succeed, like you're going to have to work 50, 60 hours a week. Like you're just going to, it is what it
That's
is.
regardless of the field you're going to be in. If you're going to be a plumber and an electrician and you want to be good.
So like, just love it, and then have a plan of where you want to be and kind of chip away at things. So you want to be an AD, or you want to be this. It's like, well, what are the skill sets required of that position? And let me start acquiring them right now, and not when I get to the spot one above it, and then I'm going to start working on it, right? So then you have things like Price's Law, right, where it's the mechanic, as an example of the mechanic, where he was a great mechanic, worked at the shop for a long time, and then they promote him to shop manager, and he sucks because he didn't have the skill set to be a shop manager, but he was an unbelievable mechanic, right? So, and also like, I think it's a lot of times people talk like this upward trajectory, and it's like, I want to be here, and I want to be here, and I want to be there. It's like, there is absolutely nothing wrong with being a strength coach, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with being a dietitian. There's nothing wrong with whatever. Like, it's not about necessarily like always trying to be the best thing. It's like, what do you want to be? Go do it and develop the skill set. Because the thing is like, if you don't like have a plan or become part of someone else's, and you have to have a plan of where you want to be, start chipping away and executing it. Because then what you can do is you can start making some of those early mistakes along the way too. And then that way, when you get to that, that dream spot, like we talked about at the beginning of the call, like you're not losing credibility by doing some silly stuff, or making some quote rookie mistakes, because, you've kind of already gotten your feet wet in some of these areas as you've progressed along your career.
You're talk about the mechanic being the sales manager. Like, if you're the best strength coach on the floor, it might be because you're the best programmer. But if you get that high performance role, now you have to lead other departments. Like, that is something that some strength coaches are starting to realize right now.
Yeah, you're not gonna have the time to program, right? It's no, you see it all the time. Like, we always see it. Like, we have blind spots because we love what we do, but you see it all the time with football coaching, right? You have the defensive coordinator or the offensive coordinator that is a great offensive and defensive coordinator, and then they got to go be the head person, right? And may not have the skill set with the media, may not have the skill set when they got to be in front of, like, they control their side of the ball, but may not have the skill set to really command the whole room or command the entire, command the entire organization. The same thing happens kind of on our side of things, is like, if you're a great strength coach and you want to go be this next thing, like, you got to understand what that involves. And like, if that's not in your wheelhouse, you can put it in there, like, but it's going to kind of require some work along the way. And the best time to go do that is when you're not waiting on that next jump to go get that next promotion. Like, start that thing early in your career. It's like, what do you got to do to be a great coach? Well, it's the same thing with being a great administrator or whatever. Like, you got, improv is a skill that's important, because there's a lot of things that are going to happen on a daily basis that you're not going to be prepared for. So there's going to be some carryover regardless of where you're at. But again, it's a great point that you made, where it's like, you're really good at this, and this is what made you a great strength coach. It's like, you got to understand, like, you may not be doing that at your next job, and you have to be okay with that. Because if it's something that you really love to do and that's what lights your fire, then why are you going to chase this other thing too?
It almost sounds like that is your advice, because my next question was going to be, what is your advice to a strength coach that is that director? Like, if they're the head of the department, what are you telling them? What are you looking back and saying, hey, this is what I recommend you do?
Yeah, I think it's I think I probably just said it. I would just say, like, just know what you want to do. Like, don't feel like you need to go do something else or go be an administrator or go be a high performance person if that's not what you want to do. Like, you live your life and do the things that you want to do. And if it is something that you want to do, then again, like, probably need to do some things to study some things on the nutrition side. You need to make sure you're brushing up on your sports science, and kind of and obviously learning the medical piece. But if it's not, that's fine. Then just continue to dig in and be the best damn strength coach that you can possibly be.
What's something that you would tell, like, you right now, that you would give younger you at Valdosta State a piece of advice on? What would you tell yourself, younger self?
I would say the skill set that I've really tried to work on the last couple years is a willingness to have difficult conversations.
Huh.
And I think we are in a service related business where we want to please everyone all the time, right?
100%.
Coaches, athletes, like, we want to be the best strength coach, and we want to be liked, and we want to be whatever. And sometimes it's at the extent of our self. It's
Facts.
you're traveling with this Olympic sport, and they want you to, travel whatever because there's some tournament there that weekend. But it's like you got something going on with your kids, like. And how many times in our profession would we just eat it with our family and just whatever, and then go make that trip with the sport team, just because like that's what we're supposed to do. It's like, or you can just have the difficult conversation and be like, hey, I'm a little tight, I'm a little strung out, like this means a lot to me, but I got to go do this thing for my family, and not always being an accommodator, right? I think that helping people personally doing that, but also at work, it's like, hey, this practice plan or the way that this program is designed or what we're doing nutritionally right now, like this is not elite. We can definitely do better. And so you're either going to deal with that in two ways. You can either have that difficult conversation and deal with it right away, and then get out in front of it, hopefully, and make some adjustments. Maybe some adjustments get made, maybe they don't, but at least that you said what was needed to be said, and you can put your head on the pillow at night, right? The flip side of that is you don't have the conversation, and then things become difficult at some point because of the ramification of not having that conversation on the front end, right? So, again, I think that's something I'm trying to get better at. I've really tried to dig in, especially like the last year or two, and a willingness to have difficult conversations, to kind of air things out and be 100% transparent with everything on the front end, and then everyone knows expectations. Again, and I think it just makes everyone more efficient and clear on roles and responsibilities and stuff like that.
When you were at a Valdosta State, and right now you have the ability to talk to coaches like that are at those schools that, like you said, some people might be like, oh, this is not the place to be. Like, what would be your piece of advice to help them water where the grass is greener where you water it, not where you're looking over the fence? Like, what's your piece of advice to those coaches to do a great job at that place? Because some of my most fun time of coaching was back at that Maryland, or when I was at Harvard, and I just got to coach the athletes, and you're just doing the thing.
Mm-hmm. I think if you don't do a good job where you're at, like, and you kind of get in the habit of chasing a title or chasing a promotion or chasing money, then what ends up happening is you become like you get this sword, this mighty sword of power and title, right? And then you end up cutting everyone's arms off because you have no idea how to wield this sword, right? And then you cut the arm off of this coworker, cut the arm off of that coworker, and you cut your own leg off because you don't know how to wield that sword because you were so busy chasing money, power, title that you never really got better at your craft, right? Like, like I'm nerding, but like perfect your craft. Like I'm just really big on that. Like I don't care what it is, but like just to try to be the best at it. And again, like you chase a title and it's great. It's like when I'm the boss, whatever. It's like, okay, like shit hits different when you're the one that's in charge,
Yeah.
and not only that, but it's like I'm in charge, whatever, quote, I'm in charge. Great. But you also have the weight of all of the people that you work with and their families and the schools that they're going to. Like, you can't just be jumping around and doing stuff willy nilly, because if we do something that gets so and so fired or so and so hurt, it's like then everyone's out on the street and everyone's trying to put a roof over their kids' heads, and everyone's trying to put food on the table. So it's like you have a responsibility when it comes time. And I still believe that I don't care if you're a graduate assistant, you're in a position of leadership. So it's like you just have a responsibility to do that stuff. And it's like, don't lie to yourself and do things along the way to get out of there and be doing a good job. And again, because you start chasing stuff, you're not enjoying where you're at. You're not going to do a good enough job to get that spot anyway. So you might as well just lock in and be where your feet are and try to crush that thing. And then if things happen, they happen. If they don't, they don't.
I think that's a mic drop moment for everybody to end the show on. I know I could talk to you for hours, and not going to do that to you. So I want you to enjoy the rest of this draft week. Hopefully, we'll be rooting for you over here in the Midwest. Go Panthers. And thanks again for taking the time to talk to us today, Coach.
Awesome. Appreciate it, man.
Congratulations on making it to the end of the video. Why don't you celebrate by watching more videos just like it? You can also help us on our quest to placate the algorithm gods by liking, sharing, subscribing, and commenting. Thank you.